Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the phenomenon which is sort of increasing almost by the day in terms of articles and pieces that I'm seeing, something that's called restorative justice. Now, it's a broad term and something that's loved by the globalists and loved by the activists in this SJW activists, and it's supposed to be, or if you like, in its initial and basic form, it's where people who have committed crimes take responsibility for those crimes and the effect it's had on the supposed victim of the crime. So it sort of began in some ways by, say, as someone who'd burglarized somebody's home. They've broken into somebody's home and they've trashed it and burglarized it, stolen the grandmother's jewelry or something like that, and they're caught and they're supposed to face the victim and say, look, I'm really sorry, and I understand the damage I did, and I understand the consequences that it's been for you, and I'll never do it again, and I've learnt my lessons and so on. Now, this was disproportionately put to people who, criminals, lawbreakers. And this was, in the early stages, very disproportionately black people were being dragged into this. Didn't appear to have a great effect. Then that was viewed as racist. So the net was widened to ensure that lots of white people were caught up in it, and the white people were strong-armed into really engaging in this victim impact statements being read out in court and things like that. So it became very socio-politicized, as the justice system has indeed all over the Western world, as soon as the globalists got their clammy hands on it. But it's also been something that's taught now in very ideological terms, taught now in legal studies in universities, this idea of restorative justice. And it's now taken a much broader meaning, and it's fed into what we now know as the Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the compensation, slavery. There's a whole lot of things that have been shoved into this restorative justice, and it's now, if you feel like, a catch cry term or a headline term to mean how evil white people have to apologize for what they've done. Colonialism, the whole lot. It's all been tipped into this, and it's kind of, and the restorative justice. And it's meant to be, or is now being used rather, as to, well, we can break the law, we can fabricate evidence, we can tell any lie, we can do whatever we want. Because we say we're victims and we've suffered as a consequence, then it kind of doesn't really matter how many lies we tell or how many falsehoods or how many people we arbitrarily rando accuse. That doesn't really matter, because of our victim status, we can say we're entitled to some sort of compensation. And if it's not against an individual, then against a class, then it's against a whole race of people, then against a whole nation. So we can now do that, and that restorative justice will compensate us for the misdeeds of the past, or the alleged misdeeds that we say are misdeeds. And because we're not as wealthy as wealthy white people, then the benchmark is we've got nothing, and we want to compare ourselves to wealthy white people. So the benchmark is you have to bring us up to the standard of wealth that the top 10%, richest 10% of white people have, because that's where we would have been had bad things not happened to us. Now, of course, once you start to drill down even sort of a small amount, the absurdity of that's quite stark. In which black country in the world is the black population wealthy from their own efforts and their own endeavors? And I don't mean corrupt stealing of World Bank handouts or something like that, but where would you find it? Is there even 1% or half? I mean, you just don't find it. It's nowhere. And in most countries, where slaves ended up being sent, as the Caribbean, North America, for example. The average citizen in those countries is better off than nearly every country in Africa. So if the argument is that these slavery or colonialism made these people worse off, then that's patently absurd. That's not the case. The next thing is colonialism made these societies in which the black people moved into, quite wealthy in world terms. Well, not in every case, but in certainly in some of them. And Brazil, for example, is quite a bit better off than Portugal these days in many ways. So there's this idea that only black people or slaves were uniquely impoverished and put into an impoverished, that also falls apart. So it then comes down to the moral issue of, I could have been a rocket scientist, but because I didn't end up as a rocket scientist, that must be because of slavery, colonialism, white supremacy, therefore I am entitled to restorative justice, therefore I'm entitled to arbitrarily make up whatever nonsense I want to in order to present myself as a victim entitled to compensation. So that's really the circular argument of it all. And again, it makes no sense. It's beyond absurd. But I've been looking at a number of court cases where, you've got activist lawyers that are able to represent people that couldn't even dream of understanding the legal process, let alone affording it. So you're not looking at an organic movement here. You're looking at a very well-funded, very brutish, very aggressive activist movement. This whole restorative justice thing is an activist movement. And it's part of the wider globalist project, ideological project to undermine the fabric of Western society, to break up white society and to humiliate it, to shame it, and all these sort of things. Because again, these white people are the biggest obstacle to globalization, as the globalists see it. The globalists want arbitrary law, arbitrary exercising of power, or the idea of being constrained by the law, constrained by courts. This is outrageous to the globalists. And so these things like restorative justice are just devices, tools, blunt instruments to beat the white societies into compliance or submission, so the globalist project can continue unopposed and unquestioned. That's all it is. It has no basis in any sensible understanding of the issues, and never will. It can only be used, but because the globalists again control the media and all that sort of stuff, they're able to push this and able to amplify it through the universities, the activists in the universities. And it goes to show, illustrate that if you want to shut down globalization, then, apart from making sure the media is free, which it isn't currently, it's all globalist control mouthpieces, but a free media, and making sure these low IQ kids don't go to university and putting them out into strictly merit-based pass or fail. And when the brightest kids get to university, there's very few, some will, but very few of them will end up being these activists. They'll be too busy pursuing careers and studying hard and that sort of thing. Now some will, but very few. And so really you cut off the supply of activists as soon as you apply merit entrance into university. The second you apply a merit entrance to university, then you've cut off 90% plus of the cannon fodder that the globalists are able to radicalize going through the university and senior high school, which means then you'd cut off the activists going into law schools and teachers' colleges and so on. So these are very important steps to take. But this we need to understand. This restorative justice is designed to create arbitrary outcomes in the court of the law, and rules of evidence and facts just don't apply. You declare yourself as a victim, you're from a minority group, then the activism within the legal sphere now all across the West, activist judges and so on, means that you can actually run this and get away with it. And in the restorative justice thing, this idea, well, it's okay if we fabricate evidence because because we're only just using it to highlight our victim status. It's okay if we tell lies, okay if we commit perjury. All of these things are acceptable because we're doing something virtuous. We're engaging in restorative justice. And so these people have got no qualms about it. They have no shame of what they're doing, but expect everyone else to be ashamed by what might have happened 200, 300, 400 years ago. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.